Aleichem. So the Sicha of Emor Daled is actually based on three different Sichas, and very long Sichas. So, for example, we're not going to go through all the details, but just to see about like what it's based on. So the first is in the early years of Rebbe's Nasias, Rebbe used to Farbrengen on the simple space of Sheva. It was usually for Bnei Yeshiva. So for Yeshiva students, it was a certain style of Farbrengen that was unique only to simple space of Sheva. And over here is simple space of Sheva, Tafshin Test 1958. And the part that our Sicha is based on goes from here and just goes on and on and on and on and on and on till about, no, it goes on, it continues. Okay, then there is the other Sicha, and that is the Sicha of, that's the Sicha of Tafshin Chaf, and that goes on also for lots and 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 lots of pages. So just to appreciate when the people put together the Sicha, what they had to do to figure it out. It just goes on and on and on. Then finally, there is the Sicha in Tafshin Lamed Aleph. So first was 1958, and then there was single space Sheva 1959. And then it was Shabbos Parshas Bereishis, Tafshin Lamed Aleph, 1970. And over there, we'll find some nuggets that didn't make it into the Farbrengen. That was start into the Sicha. The Rebbe speaks about Simcha, Al-Pi, we're coming from Zman Simcha Seinu, says the general Simcha in serving Hashem, like it says, Ivdos Hashem b'Simcha, and like it says, Ani Nivresi L'Shamash Es Kaini, etc. So everybody has to do things b'Simcha. Then there are multiple levels in Simcha. And then the Rebbe gives an introduction, and he's about how we see in that whatever is begali in Torah Shebal Peh, things are more revealed in Torah Shebal Peh than they are in Torah Shebechsav. For example, Tefillin, it just says and in Torah Shebal Peh it's exposed. And the Rebbe brings an interesting thing. He says there's a din in Shulchan Aruch, Hilchos Kibud Avim, the student can go study wherever they feel they're going to see more success, even if their parents disagree. Because a person should always live in Magam Shlei B'Chebetz. Now, seemingly that's part of Hilchos Talmud Torah, because it's highlighting the importance of Talmud Torah over Kibud Avim. So why is it in Hilchos Kibud Avim? To show that it's a law in Kibud Avim. In other words, that it's not that there's a contradiction between Kibud Avim, but rather it has to be there. So what do you see over here? That by setting halacha in a certain place, there could be a difference in halacha l'maisa. Why? Because what you're learning over here is by listening to his parents, he's actually doing Kibud Avim, and this idea that everything's expanded in Torah Shebal Peh, and it's where it's located is important, is seen especially by Rambam. And by regard to what we're talking about, the general idea of Simcha and Avodas Hashem is brought in Rambam at the end of Hilchos Lulav. And then it's not understood. Why? What's the Seder in the Divrei Ram? First, he talks about various levels of Simcha. Then he talks about the general idea of Simcha. Now, seemingly, it should start off the opposite. First, start off with the general idea of Simcha, then go up to the multiple levels of Simcha. And also, why is Rambam not mentioned Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah? And especially based on the fact that the Knesset Agdolah say that Shmini Atzeres Simchas Torah, you say Zman Simchas Seinu. So you're going up. Simchas Torah must be a higher level. So why is it not? Especially as you see in Minhag Yisrael, that this idea of Simchas Torah is a Minhag Yisrael Torahi, which is higher than Nevi'im, etc. That's why you could put a Chumash on top of Nevi'im, etc. So simple space of Sheva is from the Nevi'im, and Simchas Torah is a minhag, which is higher. So why is the Rambam not mentioned? In general, what's the whole order? And then the Rebbe went on to explain that the idea of the Rambam that they used to Gedolei Chachmei Yisrael, Rashi Yeshivas, Sanhedrin, etc. He enumerates, even though the Mishnah just says Chassidim Anshe Ma'aseh, and in the Brisa it also says Bali Tshuva, and like the Rebbe explained in the Sicha, because from the story of the Gemara and Babli Yishalmi about the behavior of a few Tanoim, you can understand that these Tanoim includes all the types that do it. Rabbi Shua Hananya, who used to argue with the non-Jews, of Shimon Gamliel, Nasi Sanedin, Hillel Zaken, the Skanim, Rabbi Shimon Tzadok, who was called Rabbi because he didn't have Talmidim. Because he had Talmidim, he was such a yeshiva, and the reason why it doesn't mention Mali Tshuva because it's included in the Chassidim, because he goes according to his opinion that a Chassid is somebody who is constantly stretching himself, not a Chassid Meikar. Now the Rebbe at the Farbrengen said that the story in the Gemara about the behavior of a few Tanoim that says in its name, it's understood that it's including many people. The Rebbe said it's not the way people think that's part of the Haggadah Shabbat, just stories. And therefore, you're learning it like a song, and you don't delve into it. And even if you delve into it, you don't grasp it. No, details are important, even in these things which we think are agadita. Then, when the Rebbe mentioned Hillel Zaken, the Rebbe says to point out the famous discussion about what does it mean Hillel Zaken. Some people say it's because after that there was another Hillel, who was a big lamdan. So that people shouldn't get confused, it should be Hillel Zaken. Again, it's similar to the previous Sicha that we learned with, where the Rebbe kind of mixes in to something which seems not to be in the Sicha, and that is who was Rav Abdimus, and making decisions. Over here, the Rebbe is making, who's this Hillel Zaken? And why is he called Hillel Zaken? The Rebbe says it's hard to say that Hillel Zaken just because he had a grandchild, Hillel. So, because according to this, you have to say that before his grandson became a big rabbi, he was just known Hillel, and later on he became known as Hillel Zaken. That's not the way it seems in Shas. It seems he was always called Hillel Zaken. So the Rebbe says that Hillel Zaken is from the expression Skanim Shabbatai, the elders, Ziknei Agalu. In other words, he was a saint, so people called him Zaken. But nevertheless, he's not considered Chachmei Yisrael. He's rather Ziknei Yisrael. Like the Gemara says, if there's a zaken, they say zaken. If not, they say chacham. Because a zaken is a whole different level of a talmid chacham. Then on the idea that chassidim included in Baal Tshuva, the difference is only what they used to say by Simchas V'Shiva. The Baal Tshuva said something else, but the Rambam doesn't discuss that. And then on the point that the Rebbe finishes off and saying that the explanation in the Rambam after that the idea of simcha, the general idea of simcha, like we find by David HaMelech, not that like the Yushalmi that says that David HaMelech, David HaMelech's happiness is brought in continuation of Simchas Beis HaSheva, because the story of David, there was no Beis HaMikdash, so you can't learn from Simchas Beis HaSheva. But the general idea of simcha, it's avodah kasha yes, it's a harder avodah, it's avodah gdela that you should feel simcha every single day, and that's why it's the ultimate level. And the lesson is that this simcha needs to be not only Zman Simcha Seinu, but in every single day. And never finished off. And this simcha that we learn from David Malka Mashiach has to be also when we're at the end of Galus, in this incredible darkness that's talking to us. So much so, the Rebbe says that that people are calling the state of Israel as Chat Gul, the beginning of the redemption and the great era, even though we've never had as many tzaros and Torah mitzvahs and Miu Yehudi, etc. So what's the explanation? The explanation is, like the Frierdiker Rebbe says, before dawn is the greatest darkness. So too, at Geula, the closer we get to Geula, the darkness gets greater, but Geula Shlema is coming. Take it from Yad Mamash. L'chaim, l'chaim.